Now we start with this hour with Russia and Ukraine. At least 57 Ukrainian drones have been intercepted and destroyed by Russia's air defenses overnight. The attacks were reported across multiple Russian regions, including Samara, Volgograd, Saratov, and Rostov. A significant number of the drones were downed in the Samara region, where 23 unmanned aerial vehicles were targeted. Meanwhile, in Volgograd, Ukrainian drones have attacked residential buildings, including 3 people. Authorities report that the victims are receiving medical attention and their injuries are not life-threatening. Fire also broke out at an apartment building following the assault. The local administration has opened temporary shelters for displaced residents, while bomb squads continue to assess the damage. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Vasilin Popovsky. He's a professor and Vice Dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, now looking at this, it seems like Ukraine has changed or upgraded their military strategy, attacking several regions in a night, not just one. What are the strategic implications of now Ukraine targeting multiple Russian regions now?
Yes. By the way, several days ago, Ukraine destroyed one of the biggest oil exporting port in the Black Sea, Novorossiysk. And that is a very, very significant news, because this is where Russia gets all its money to continue the war and continue to kill civilians and commit war crimes in Ukraine. So that was pretty much significant, the hit on Novorossiysk. The latest news, yes, Volgograd is another area which has many military objects. It has airports from where Russian airplanes fly and also shoot missiles and drones into the Ukrainian territory. Well, basically everything in Russia which has some military significance represent a target for Ukrainian drones. There is absolutely no doubt about that. There is absolutely no surprise about that. Such attacks will continue, and Russia should be prepared for this. Until the aggressor withdraws its troops from Ukraine and goes home, there will be such attack. Ukrainians have no other choice but to hit military targets all over Russia. And they will continue to be supplied with those missiles that hit to a longer range into the Russian territory. So basically no Russian city anymore will be safe if the policy of Vladimir Putin continues, and if he continues to kill civilians in Ukraine and doesn't withdraw from the illegally occupied regions in Ukraine. So that's the message here. It doesn't matter how many drones the Russians can gun down. There will always be some drones and some missiles that will penetrate the Russian air defense system and hit the military targets in Russia. So that's the equation here. Nobody in Russia should be safe until Vladimir Putin change the course, accept the ceasefire, propose 7-8 times already. Donald Trump is absolutely pissed off with Russia because he proposed so many times ceasefire, 30 days, limited, unlimited, and every of those attempts to achieve ceasefire basically collapsed. The diplomacy collapsed. There are no talks anymore between Washington and Moscow. There is an exchange of threats between the two. And that escalation and that lack of diplomacy effectively means that the war continues entirely. The guilty part is very clear here. It is the Moscow regime by Vladimir Putin. Those hits will continue.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Popovsky, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to UK, Britain has said that it would launch the largest overhaul of policy on asylum seekers, drawing inspiration from Denmark's approach, which is one of the toughest in Europe. The Labour government has been hardening its immigration policies, particularly on illegal small boat crossings from France. This comes as the government seeks to stem the surging popularity of the populist Reform UK party, which has driven the immigration agenda and forced Labour to adopt a tougher line. As part of the changes, the statutory duty to provide support to certain asylum seekers, including housing and weekly allowances, will be revoked. The government has stated that the measures would apply to asylum seekers who can work but choose not to, and to those who break the law. It has said that taxpayer-funded support would be prioritized for those contributing to the economy and local communities. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean of Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now looking at this, how is the UK government's adoption of Denmark-style asylum policies? How do you think this would affect the rights and protection of asylum seekers? And what are the potential social and economic impacts that could result from this statutory support?
Yes, I will say this is unfortunate news that the Labour Party is following basically not only the Denmark-style tough measures on asylum seekers, but also on the Reform UK, very nationalistic and populist policy agenda. And so how to balance the popularity of the Reform UK, the Labour Party decides to move that direction in order to get some more votes in future elections, because they are losing. All the opinion polls show that Reform UK is most popular in opinion polls. We will see when the elections come, but that's a very unfortunate development. And yes, the Interior Minister was very clear that tough measures will be imposed only on those asylum seekers that refuse to work and those that commit some crime, even minor crimes. So there will be a kind of an individual approach to each asylum seeker. So not all of them will be affected, but only those who are not working and those who basically are burden for the taxpayers. But on the opposite, asylum seekers who do contribute to the British economy and pay their taxes and are compliant and peaceful citizens, there shouldn't be any problem with those. But yes, we see all over again, all over Europe, some increasing nationalistic and xenophobic statements. That language of nationalist party is a matter of concern. And because Britain used to be seen as the most friendly country and policy towards asylum seekers, there have been a lot of illegal crossing across the channel, and that needs also to be properly addressed. And this is where the British government is moving into kind of strengthening the ports of entry and to make the rules more strict, somehow to discourage potential future migrants to cross the channels and to seek asylum. Yes, such policy can be understood, but on another hand, it's not the policy that Britain should continue for very long. I hope this is temporary until the balance is brought back into proper consideration of every case. And if there is a genuine asylum case, then the British government should give asylum and encourage people to work rather than to go into the direction of Denmark, I suppose.
And what do you think, to what extent is this hardening of immigration policy? You already mentioned that it is a response to domestic political pressure, such as the rise of the Reform UK party. What do you think this is reflecting of changes in UK?
Yes, it is reflecting a lot of changes in the UK. Reform UK is a kind of a very surprisingly strong now in the opinion polls. And the major kind of concern in Britain is next elections and whether Nick Farage and such extreme right-wing nationalists and populists may come to power. And hopefully not, because Labour and Conservative are the two very long-standing traditional parties in Britain, and they are adopting proper policies and somehow informing the population what they do, reducing the social and economic burdens on the taxpayers in Britain. Yes, there are a lot of options. There is a long list of policies that the British government can undertake in order to limit the influence of the extreme right party, the Reform UK. And we hope to see those happening in the next months.
Yes, indeed. With that, I would like to thank Professor Veselin Popovsky for always joining us and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on. U.S. President Donald Trump has bought at least $82 million in corporate and municipal bonds from late August to early October, including new investments in sectors benefiting from his policies. While financial disclosures were made public, according to reforms released by the U.S. Office of Government Ethics, Trump has made more than 175 financial purchases between August 28th and October 2nd. The disclosures were filed under the 1978 Ethics in Government Act, which do not specify exact amounts for each transaction and instead list them within broad financial ranges. The maximum total value of the bond purchases have exceeded over $337 million. Trump's new bond investments span several industries, including sectors that have already benefited or are benefiting from his administration's policy changes, such as financial deregulation. However, corporate bonds acquired by Trump includes offerings from chipmakers such as Broadcom and Qualcomm, tech companies such as Meta Platforms, retailers, and Home Depot, as well as CVs, and Wall Street banks such as Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. Now we move on. A delegation from the Caribbean community will meet British officials this week to discuss reparations for slavery and colonialism. CARICOM advocates say addressing the historical injustices of slavery and their lasting effects, including racism, is long overdue. The plan includes calls for a formal apology, education programs, debt cancellation, and monetary compensation. The visit runs from November 17th to 20th and aims to strengthen partnerships and promote public education on the reparations agenda. Reparations debates have faced opposition in Europe, with leaders like British Prime Minister Keir Starmer preferring to focus on the future. Still, the issue was highlighted at last year's Commonwealth Summit, where leaders agreed the time had come to discuss it. A 2025 poll shows most Britons remain unaware that over 3 million Africans were forcibly transported to the Caribbean. Now for this discussion, we welcome Robinder Sachdev. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much.